Hello everybody. So I'm here recording this week's lecture because we're having the football holiday on Thursday during our class. As you can see, I am well dressed for the occasion to give it some extra special flavor here. Actually, I gave a talk to a group of retirees this morning, so I needed to look sharp, and now I am here to talk to you. So this week's lecture is on the West and war with Mexico. And we're covering pretty much the same time period that we've been covering on other occasions. We're looking particularly at the 1830s and 1840s. And our theme and particular focus today is on how the United States expanded westward and eventually got embroiled in a war with Mexico that the United States was victorious in and that won enormous amounts of land from Mexico and added them to the United States. And then at the end of the class, we'll see that there is a new looming crisis for the United States that's going to run into the Civil War and the question of slavery and what to do about slavery in the territories that have been won from Mexico. So that is the arc of today's lecture. I will stop periodically during lecture, so there's not one big long file, okay, but it'll be all together like a lecture that we have in class. Okay. So I want to start by talking a little bit about some general characteristics of Western expansion, just exactly what I'm talking about when I say Western expansion. Okay, so we're looking today in particular about lands that were acquired in the 1830s and 1840s. Before that, the United States had acquired territory in Louisiana, which is the green portion of the map that you see here. That was in 1803. And then afterwards, the United States had added a little bit of territory in what is today Alabama and Mississippi, what was then in the 19th century referred to as West Florida, which is the panhandle of Florida today, plus parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and a little bit of Louisiana. That had been added in the 18 teens. The United States purchased Florida from Spain in 1821. And the same treaty that purchased Florida from Spain also settled the borders between the Louisiana Territory and Spanish Texas, and gave the United States regions in the Pacific Northwest the Oregon Territory, which the borders of were sort of ill-defined, and we'll get back to that as we move into today's lecture. The territories that were added in the 1830s and 1840s that we'll talk mostly about are Texas, number one. You can see Texas in the yellow on our map. And all of the territories are going to have a larger size than the states today. So Texas, the territory, was larger than Texas, the state today. Okay, so Texas we'll talk about. Then we'll also talk about the Oregon Territory, which again was larger than it is now and included the today's states of Washington, Oregon, a little bit of Montana in there, and Idaho as well. But also the Oregon Territory stretched into what is today Canada, and the borders were disputed. We'll also talk about two other territories, California, which is California, today's state of California, plus Nevada, plus parts of Utah, and then also what was called the New Mexico Territory, which is also partly today's state of New Mexico, also part of today's Arizona. So those are the lands in particular we're talking about when we talk about expansion: Texas, Oregon, California, New Mexico. Okay? And they're all bigger than they are today. One of the things to keep in mind when I talk about expansion and filling in the western part of the United States is that in the 19th century, for people at the time, there's no reason why the expansion should stop just where it did stop. There are people who say the United States should have a piece of more territory, including places like Cuba. All right, Cuba is down there below Florida. People wanted to seize Cuba for the United States. A larger chunk of Mexico, so maybe all of northern Mexico down to Mexico City. Parts of Central America. There were American invasions of Nicaragua, for example. Not by the U.S. government, but by private citizens who invaded Nicaragua and tried to take it over, possibly to add to the United States in the future. And then there are strong advocates for a big Oregon, so all of the Oregon Territory moving into what is today Canada. So there's no reason why according to people at the time, why the United States should stop where it did. It could have expanded north into what's today Canada, south into what's today Mexico, or even into Central America, and certainly taking over Caribbean islands like Cuba. Okay, so no reason to stop where the country did stop. Okay. The interest in expanding the United States often goes under the term manifest destiny. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what manifest destiny means. The term itself, destiny, right, means the fate. Manifest simply means obvious. So when people said manifest destiny, they meant it was the obvious fate for the United States to expand as wide and far as possible, to the west, to the north, to the south. Right? That was U.S. expansion. It was the fate of the United States, and that's obvious that that's what was going to happen. So manifest destiny, if you want a brief definition of it, was the belief that U.S. expansion was inevitable and that it should be encouraged. Okay, well, I think, well, if it's inevitable, why do you have to encourage it? It really means speed up. So it was something that was inevitably going to happen, but the United States should speed up that process and make it happen as fast as possible. Going along with the belief that the United States would expand, should expand, was a belief that it was good for all. And by all, what people meant was good for Americans, especially small-scale farmers, who would then have more land to farm on. But also, there is the assumption that expansion will be good for the people who currently held the territory. It will be good for Mexicans. It will be good for Native Americans. The belief was that by expanding American influence, American institutions, the English language, the Protestant religion, which was the majority faith in the United States, or Protestant Christianity, that would be good for everyone, even those who currently were different, who were Mexican citizens, who practiced Catholicism, or Native Americans who lived on various lands, had their own religious traditions, their own culture. The assumption was that by expanding American rule, democracy, culture would be good for everyone. You see some of that here in this picture that you can see here. A very sort of glorified vision of American westward expansion. Okay, you can see all the light out to the distance. That's where the Americans are going to go. And they're going to spread on that territory and bring American things like liberty and American institutions like democracy to as many people as possible. Okay, there's nobody there. It looks empty. That's the message that Manifest Destiny is assuming and using to spread its influence over the country. Okay, so that concludes my introductory remarks. We'll take a brief break here, and you go on to the next segment of the lecture on some more characteristics of expansion and some reasons for expansion as it unfolded in the 1830s.